Tim or Patrick, you want to talk about wind energy in 2012 here in New York State?
Yes. So New York State has a policy called the Renewable Energy Standard, which requires that we obtain 30% of our electricity from renewable resources by the year 2015. And
what is your definition of renewable resources besides wind?
Yes. Well, the state defines renewables as small hydro, solar, landfill gas, wood, and wind.
Okay.
I think they're the main ones. So far, for example, solid waste, trash burning, has not been included in the definition of renewable energy in the state.
Mm-hmm.
So, wind, solar, hydro are the main ones.
Okay, and what exactly do you folks do with wind energy, and how exactly does it work?
Yes, good question. We are developers and builders and operators. Of course, before you can finance and operate and construct a project, you have to develop a project, and it takes a long time. It can take literally from 3 to 10 years to develop a project. So we mainly spend our time on development, although we have a number of projects that are in operation or in construction already. So that's what we do. With regard to what wind energy is, Tim Ahrens came from AWS TrueWind, which is a company actually up the street here. Mm-hmm. And so Tim maybe can talk a little bit about wind energy and technology.
Sure. The purpose is to capture the energy that's produced by the wind, and as you mentioned, we've been using it for years. And as you can see on when you started the intro, 3-bladed configurations, and essentially, as the wind blows, the blades will capture that energy, rotate, which will in turn turn a generator, which will produce the energy that we can then feed back into the local grid for consumption by the local community.
Now, how exactly do you get energy on a day when it's not windy?
The turbines will operate in optimal conditions, and so when it's not windy, they won't operate. And obviously, when it is windy, they'll operate, and they operate up to the performance to capture as much wind as they can to put back.
Now, are you able to store the electricity that is generated by wind energy, so that when you have the days when it's not windy, like in the middle of the summer or something?
There are storage technologies. The most obvious one is hydro pump storage. Mm-hmm. So at nighttime, you would pump water into a reservoir at the top of a hill, mm-hmm. and then during the day you'll let the water run down. So during the night you have a pump, and during the day you have a turbine. So that's the most obvious way to store electricity. But we haven't perfected storage technologies yet. We have, of course, the hybrids, we have the Priuses, mm-hmm. and we're just beginning to get more electric cars. But still, even with the cars, we're still trying to perfect the batteries. So it's good that we're going down that road. But even for mass-produced, for mass-produced machinery, we're still not there yet. So for us, the storage is the grid. And so the grid, your supply and demand is changing all the time. It's mm-hmm. almost, it's probably doubling at peak from the lowest point of demand during the day. And so what you have is various kinds of power generation equipment that can adjust instantaneously to changes in demand. So when you turn on your lights or your toaster or coffee machine or grinder, the power plants are able to adjust straight away.
Now, you guys represent Ridgeline of Albany. What exactly is the role of Ridgeline in Albany?
You want to take that, Tim?
Sure. The Ridgeline office here in Albany is responsible for Eastern development, specifically focusing mostly on the Northeast. So we're trying to work and develop both wind and solar projects in New York, Massachusetts, and other states as well too.
Yeah, the company is actually headquartered in Seattle.
Okay.
So we were there last week. It's a long trip, but I'm there perhaps about once a month. So we're headquartered in Seattle. We're founded in 2002, but we're developing projects in California, the Northwest, the Northeast, and we're also looking, in the Southeast as well.
I understand you have wind energy right now in the Lowville area and the Madison County area of New York State. What other parts of New York State are starting to rely on wind energy? Either one of you guys.
Yeah, that's a great question. The first projects in New York were actually in central New York, in Madison County, and there are now 3 projects there. And then the development started in western New York, Wyoming County, Erie County, also Steuben County, and then also in the North Country. So up in Franklin, Lewis County, as you mentioned, Franklin County and Clinton County. So over the last 10 years, central New York, western and northern New York, and we're looking at projects, I would say, east central. So, for example, in Delaware County, Otsego, Herkimer County, those areas. And part of the reason is because there are limited transmission lines in the state, and so those transmission lines are saturated. So we're trying to develop projects that are close to load, close to the communities where the energy is consumed. The other place, by the way, that projects are under development, and it's a fascinating area, is offshore in the Atlantic.
Right.
Many of your viewers will have heard of the Cape Wind project, which has been under development for more than 10 years, and the developer
off
there
the coast of Massachusetts, right?
Coast of Massachusetts, and the developer there has really stuck with it. Has spent, I would say, tens of millions of dollars to develop this great project. It would be built on shoals, so it won't require deep foundations, and it's relatively close to shore. So it's a great location for a project. But it hasn't been built yet. Hopefully soon it'll be built.
Well, in today's contemporary society, and we were addressing this before going on there, it seems when you want to do anything, out of the woodwork come those who are opposed to it. And I've heard of a lot of opposition in the Boston, New England area to what's going on there in Massachusetts, off the coast of Massachusetts. How is the environmental community of New York State and the business community of New York State how are they receiving what you want to do, or are you running into the people coming out of the woodwork too?
That's a very good question. I would say that New York State is very supportive of renewables. Governor Pataki in 2004, actually in 2003, in a State of the State, requested the Public Service Commission to investigate the state getting 25% of its electricity from renewables by the year 2013. And the Public Service Commission went through a year and a half long process. I think there were about 200 participants, public, business, environmental, everybody, and ended up with an order for the Retail Renewable Portfolio Standard, which required that the state get 25% of its electricity from renewables by 2013. And then between Governor Spitzer, Governor Patterson, they increased the percentage to 30% by 2015 in conjunction with an energy efficiency portfolio standard, which was designed to reduce the overall amount of electricity we consume through efficiency measures, fluorescent lights, and there's an obvious one, and better insulation and so on. So, the state's government has been very supportive of renewables, and then most recently Governor Cuomo put in place the Article 10 siting law, which put in place a process whereby projects over 25 megawatts would be permitted by the state, which I think gives some certainty to developers that there will be a standard process to permit projects. The way it is right now is each town runs its own process, and so you could have literally 900 different processes.
Is the opposition primarily, though, for aesthetic reasons and not for, to me that's almost, it's logical but almost illogical when you need energy?
Yes, sometimes we scratch we scratch our heads as well to understand that. Some people tell me that there's also jealousy. So let's say, for example, you have a landowner in the valley and then a landowner on the hill. And the landowner on the hill has always struggled. It's kind of been, struggled to farm that land, which is just not as good. It's sloped and it's maybe rocky, and it's windy. So it's always been more difficult to farm. And the landowner in the valley has beautiful, beautiful soil and has always thrived. By being able to put a couple of wind turbines on his or her land on the hill, that landowner has suddenly a wonderful crop that will make a difference. Will allow that landowner to hold on to the land, or buy more machinery, or send their children to college, or just have a better life instead of trying to farm this rock. And so it changes the balance. And some people have speculated that that part of the opposition is just people seeing that competitive balance with their neighbors change.
And what you're describing there would be one of the advantages of the community scale projects you're referring to, right?
Well, one of the advantages is that you can take a relatively small feature and create wealth. So for a larger project, let's say with 100 machines, you really need almost a town.
All right.
Whereas for a community scale project, you need a ridge that's, let's say, 3 miles long. So it certainly allows many more towns to benefit from this natural resource that they may not even be thinking about. And so, for example, a community scale project will bring tremendous benefits across the board. So in payments to the school, the town, and the county, let's say a 20 megawatt project will bring about $150,000 a year into that community, which is more than $1 million over the life of the project. It'll bring a similar amount to the landowners in the form of annual royalties, and then also a similar amount in the form of salaries for the maintenance, operations and maintenance and admin people. So that's almost $5 million a year into rural communities where there's not a lot of new development going on. So what community scale wind allows is economic development where there aren't many other possibilities.
Now, Ridgeline of Albany is also in renewable energy, interested in solar energy. Tim Ahrens, would you like to talk about the solar energy side? We've been talking about wind so far.
Sure. No problem.
I'm sorry, I can't resist doing that.
That's okay. With the solar energy, it's similar. And from the standpoint, it's using a natural resource to capture the energy produced by the sun and then convert it to electricity, put it into the grid. The infrastructure, the way that we connect to the grid is very similar. We're again looking for those existing established infrastructure locations where medium to lower voltage transmission exists, so we can tap into the local community, put the generated electricity back into the grid. It can be consumed and it'll work its way back up the line. What's left over that isn't consumed to those higher voltage lines and distributed further. And for solar, we try to identify larger parcels of contiguous property, areas that make sense, that are relatively flat, south-facing, areas where it makes sense to install a project that are done in the development is done in conjunction, with the town, with the planning boards, with the local community, making sure that this project is a good fit for this community and it's the right fit.
Now, it seems to me that most folks would not generally end up with a windmill in their backyard, but it seems like solar energy is more consumer oriented, and a lot of in fact, in the street that we live in Manans, a lot of folks have solar panels on their home. Solar is more consumer oriented, isn't it?
It can be, yes, and right now New York State has a program that has enabled that to happen, and so as you drive through neighborhoods, you will see individuals and families that have taken advantage of that to put them on their house and to make themselves more sustainable and working towards a renewable future. New York State is currently working towards a commercial scale program. They're currently evaluating it right now as to does it make sense for New York State. Areas like Massachusetts and New Jersey have programs in place that enable the construction of larger projects that can generate more electricity and put that back into the grid, because while someone may appreciate the benefits of solar energy, it may not be right for them or on their house, but if we can build a project where more people can benefit, then it makes sense.